Good evening, everybody. Breaking tonight, the FBI announcing they've located a second person sought in connection with the New York City terrorist attack. Federal authorities had asked for information for a second man from Uzbekistan, a 32-year-old described as a person of interest in that attack that left 8 dead in Lower Manhattan and 12 wounded. Federal prosecutors today charging Saipov with providing support to the Islamic State, violence and destruction of motor vehicles. According to the FBI, the suspect did ask if he could display the Islamic State flag in his hospital room as he was being interviewed. He stated that he felt good about what he had done. We'll have a full report. Also tonight, President Trump calling on Congress to end the diversity visa lottery program, that visa used by Saipov to enter the United States. President Trump said he wants to end chain migration, replace it with merit-based immigration.
Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good. It's not good. It hasn't been good. We've been against it. So we want to immediately work with Congress on the diversity lottery program, on terminating it, getting rid of it. We want a merit-based program where people come into our country based on merit.
We'll take up the president's efforts to keep America and Americans safe. Dr. Sebastian Gorka among our guests here tonight. And House Republicans, one day away from unveiling their highly anticipated tax plan. Party leaders are reportedly struggling, however, to pay for the cuts that they propose. We'll take that up with Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel here tonight as well. Our top story, the Uzbekistan native accused of killing 8 people in New York City had been planning his attack for some 2 months. And he did previous reconnaissance before he plowed his rented truck into pedestrians and bicyclists along a popular bike path. Fox News senior correspondent Rick Leventhal has the latest for us from the crime scene in Lower Manhattan.
A massive team of investigators goes inch by inch over a crime scene stretching nearly a mile along a bike path from Houston Street to Chambers Street in Lower Manhattan and search for a motive for the carnage they say was caused by 29-year-old Saifullo Saipov. Authorities say it does not appear the Uzbeki national was the target of any probe, but has associates who were on the FBI's radar. Investigators suspect Saipov became radicalized in the U.S., and notes left in the truck make it clear he had been planning the attack for weeks, likely inspired by the Islamic State.
He appears to have followed almost exactly to a T the instructions that ISIS has put out in its social media channels before, with instructions to their followers on how to carry out such an attack.
Here in the U.S. since 2010 on a legal diversity visa, Saipov allegedly drove a rented Home Depot truck at high speed, deliberately hitting bicyclists and pedestrians before slamming into a school bus, killing 8 and wounding a dozen others.
There's multiple people on the ground, Central. We need buses from Houston all the way down to Chambers. I got 4 or 5 people on the ground. Got multiple casualties. This is a mass casualty situation here.
Authorities say Saipov jumped out of the truck yelling Allahu Akbar, meaning God is great in Arabic, holding what appeared to be 2 handguns, leaving several knives behind in the vehicle. The weapons turned out to be paintball and pellet guns. 5-year veteran NYPD officer Ryan Nash, responding to the scene, shot and wounded the suspect, who is now out of surgery. Authorities are searching residences connected to the suspect in Florida and Paterson, New Jersey, where he rented an apartment next to a mosque he also attended. They've questioned his wife, who reportedly claimed no prior knowledge of the attack, and investigators are interviewing friends and family and going through Saipov's internet and phone history to look for influences or connections to known radicals. 5 of the dead were Argentinians, 2 were Americans, and the other was from Belgium. And 9 of the 12 injured are still hospitalized in serious or critical condition. The NYPD has now cleared the crime scene in Lower Manhattan, but has plenty of work ahead, including protecting this Sunday's New York City Marathon. 51,000 runners and 2.5 million spectators expected to line the 26.2-mile course that runs through all 5 boroughs. We're told they will have more sand trucks being used as blocker vehicles than ever before, and twice as many observation teams and counter sniper teams, along with heavy weapons teams on alert and on guard. Of course, this city has been on high alert for terror attacks ever since 9/11 and remains even more so tonight, with the NYPD having to shift its tactics to counter the terrorists' ever-changing tactics. Lou?
Rick, thank you very much. Rick Leventhal reporting from Lower Manhattan. President Trump today called for an end to that diversity visa lottery program, targeting Senator Chuck Schumer for his introduction of the measure while he was a member of the House back in 1990. President Trump tweeted this, quote, "The terrorists came into our country through what is called the diversity visa lottery program, a Chuck Schumer beauty. I want merit-based visas. Some 50,000 people have been allowed into the United States each and every year under the State Department program. The countries eligible include Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, as well as Uzbekistan. Slightly more now than 1 million people have entered the United States on the diversity visa since its inception in 1991. At least 24,000 people from Uzbekistan have arrived here in just the last 12 years. Our first guest describes the diversity visa as a politically correct act of madness. Joining us tonight, former strategist, deputy assistant to President Trump, now chief strategist for the Make America Great Again coalition, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Seb, it's great to have you here. An act of madness. There are so many, but this one is particularly noxious because of the terrorist attack yesterday and the very idea that people can just be allowed into the country as you spin the wheel.
Absolutely, Lou, great to be back on the show. This is the equivalent of immigration Russian roulette. The idea that someone from Afghanistan, someone from Uzbekistan, who has a high school diploma and 2 years of employment history, spins our wheel and then gets awarded a green card without any merit-based answering of the question, what do you bring to America, and then can become an anchor for other people they sponsor to come into the country. That's insanity. And the president knew this months ago. He had an intention to end it, and this makes it all the more justified that we have to reform our immigration system before we become like Europe and have attack after attack after attack.
The program itself is utter irrationality, a giveaway program from a nation that so wealthy, so strong, that it can ignore the principles of self-interest, the national interest. The president says he brings rationality to the entire debate on immigration, but in this case in particular, saying he wants a merit-based system. Why should not all of our immigration programs be based on merit, become rational?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do we mean by diversity? This is the most diverse nation in the world. Absolutely, without a question. The idea that we can't have a merit-based system, talk to anybody who's applied to emigrate to Australia or to New Zealand. These countries have some of the toughest immigration requirements based upon education, skill set, what you can do to actually raise money to look after yourself, and what you bring to that country that isn't already there. These are the kinds of questions that we have to ask, and these are the kinds of metrics that we have to put into our system. And the good news is, Lou, there's one person in the federal government responsible for this and who has the mandate. And it's not some crazy judge in the Ninth Circus Court or in Hawaii. It's not some legislator on Capitol Hill. It's the President of the United States, and right now that man is President Donald J. Trump.
And your sense of whether he can move this ahead. Is this the time to rationalize U.S. immigration?
Yeah, look, everybody talks about the politicization of tragedy. I think that's a left-wing knee-jerk reaction. Look at Las Vegas. We're going to talk about suppressors, silencers. in an attack where none were used. That's politicization. Here, we're going to insert common sense, rationality. The bottom line is, Lou, the immigration system is broken. Look at the San Bernardino attackers. Under the Obama administration, the State Department was instructed when somebody applies to come here from Pakistan, from Saudi Arabia, you are not allowed, as a federal officer issuing a visa, to look at their Facebook postings because that's private information. No, it's not. It's social media. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's like a Monty Python skit. It has to end, and common sense must prevail.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, as always, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you. We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. House Republicans unveiling their tax plan tomorrow.
Sometime tomorrow, we'll be announcing massive tax cuts and reform. Not just tax cuts.
Can lawmakers make the Christmas deadline for tax reform? We take it up with Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. And new provocations by Russia. U.S. fighter jets drive away 2 Russian bombers from the USS Ronald Reagan. They came within 80 miles of the aircraft carrier. We'll have the full report here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump convened his full cabinet today to talk tax reform, tax cuts, ahead of the unveiling of the congressional Republican plan that is now expected tomorrow. Negotiations on the proposal continue at this very hour, but it is likely that the 39.6% top tax bracket for the country's highest earners will remain in place, remain at the same rate. The president says the time for lawmakers to come to agreement and pass real tax relief is now.
Our economy and our country cannot take off the way it really should, so it's really, really competitive with the rest of the world, unless we get the kind of tax cuts for our companies and our middle class, our workers, unless we get the jobs we need. It can't really take off until we get the tax cuts and reform passed.
And joining us tonight, Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, great to have you with us. And how excited are you about an immediate prospect of tax reform? And by immediate, I'm talking about before Christmas.
Well, I'm very optimistic, Lou. This is something we have to get done. The president has led the way, and he's exactly right. It's time for us to put tax cuts in place for our businesses so we can bring more jobs in this country, and for the middle class who've been hurting. And I travel the country every day. I was in Minnesota this week, and people are hurting, and they're saying, please give us relief. It is time for us to have tax cuts. The middle class is depending on us, and Republicans are fighting for it. We'd love to see some Democrats come across the aisle and support the middle class tax cuts as well.
The middle class in this country is the foundation, as you well know, of this country, and those who aspire to it, hardworking men and women, their families. This promises to be a true middle class tax cut, but it's not the only focus. We're also looking at small business rates being improved, the pass-through rate, hopefully gaining some parity with the corporate rate of 20% as it's proposed. Are these things likely to be the final architecture of Trump tax reform?
Well, we'll see what comes out of Ways and Means tomorrow. I have full confidence in Chairman Brady, and that's the first step. Then it'll go before the whole Congress. They'll get to go talk to their constituents. This is going to be a transparent, open process, but there is a recognition that people need tax cuts. We haven't had tax reform in 30 years. We are not competitive globally with our corporate tax rates. The president is leading the way. We need to get this done. And more importantly, the middle class needs to take more money home of their hard-earned wages that they need to be spending on their family and not sending to Washington, D.C.
Are we going to see the conversation, and by the way, we should point out, without this president driving this, tax reform would already be a side issue and a laggard in terms of the public agenda in this country instead of at the forefront of it. But at the same time, these tax cuts they have to be put in place by a fellow by the name of Ryan and another fellow by the name of McConnell. Are they as committed now as they should be to push forward with this tax reform agenda?
They're absolutely committed, and we saw this when the Senate passed the budget and the House passed the budget so that we could get into reconciliation. The president absolutely has led the way. Listen, the president traveled this country during this election cycle, and he talked to the middle class of this country, and that is who he speaks for. That is who he is championing. And he is saying, it is time for you to get a tax cut. It is time for Washington to fight for the middle class, hardworking families in this country, and Republicans need to deliver on this, and I think we're in a good place, and I'm very optimistic that we're going to get this done.
You met with the president this afternoon. Care to give us a rundown on your private agenda with the president?
Well, I obviously am going to keep those conversations private. The president certainly can discuss what we talked about, but we did talk about the Virginia race a little bit, which is coming up next week, and Ed Gillespie's running tight, and we have a candidate in Virginia running for governor, and Ralph Northam, who refuses to denounce one of the most hateful, divisive, disgusting ads that have ever been aired in a political race. And I think Democrats across the board should denounce this terrible ad that's being run in Virginia.
That ad is one of the most sickening things. It was put out, by the way, fronted by Eva Longoria, the Latino Victory ad. Do we have that ad here? I just to share with it. Well, of course we don't. I lost my mind. The fact of the matter is that she is fronting an ad that is just despicable, showing people trying to run down young, apparently young Hispanics running from these folks, portrayed as the followers of Ed Gillespie. It is one of the nastiest things I've ever seen, Ronna.
It's despicable. And the fact that Ralph Northam, the candidate for governor in Virginia, refuses to denounce this, every Democrat should be denouncing this ad. To see a person in a truck with a Gillespie sticker trying to run down little children, it feeds the worst of our country in terms of hate and division and fear. And if Democrats are going to play on this, they're looking for a bad 2018, because I think Americans across this country will reject that type of message and rhetoric.
Is it also the reason, that commercial, that Ed Gillespie's cut Northam's lead by half?
I think independent voters, I think Democrats look at this and they say, this is disgusting. Even some of the papers said, the Democrat-leaning papers said it made their stomachs turn to see an ad like this. And for them to try and play on fear and division and have a Gillespie supposed supporter run down children, it's despicable. And I call on every Democrat in every leadership position across this country to denounce this ad. And most importantly, Ralph Northam, who's running to be the leader of Virginia, to denounce this ad, which he has still yet to do.
Ronna, thanks very much for being with us. We appreciate it. Ronna McDaniel.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thank you. The chairwoman of the Republican National Committee in a big race in Virginia next Tuesday. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. Do you believe Democrats are endangering the country further by opposing an end to those diversity visas? Cast your vote on Twitter @Lou Dobbs. And follow me on Twitter @Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram @Lou Dobbs Tonight. And breaking news now, President Trump intends to nominate Jerome Powell as the next Federal Reserve Chairman to replace Janet Yellen. That according to the Wall Street Journal, which reports the president talked with Powell yesterday. The president set to make a formal announcement tomorrow before he leaves for his very important Asia trip that Friday. On Wall Street, stocks closing mixed. The Dow up 58 points, the S&P up 4, and the Nasdaq down 11. Volume on the big board, 3.8 billion shares. Papa John's shares plunging to the lowest level in 8 months after missing earnings. Papa John's, which is an NFL sponsor and advertiser, saying national anthem protests on the sidelines of NFL games have cut into their sales. CEO John Snyder blames NFL leadership. And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, Democrats obstruct a congressional investigation into that fake Fusion GPS dossier. Now we know how much it costs, at least.
This is all extremely pertinent information to the ongoing Russia investigation. The American people, and I would think Democrats would want to get to the bottom of this.
Well, they don't. What don't they want you to know? It's a long list. We'll have the full report straight ahead here tonight. Stay with us. A mosque in New Jersey that the New York terrorists reportedly attended has been under surveillance by the New York Police Department for the past 12 years. The Omar Mosque, as it is known in Paterson, New Jersey, is among a number of Muslim houses of worship studied and surveilled by authorities. The Uzbek natives' Paterson apartment, by the way, was also just blocks where some of the 9/11 hijackers finalized their terrorist plot. A 28-year-old New York City police officer is being hailed as a hero tonight. He stopped the terrorist. Officer Ryan Nash is a 5-year NYPD veteran assigned to the 1st Precinct. He was one of the first officers to respond to the attacks. Nash has 2 awards for excellent police duty, 1 for meritorious police duty from the NYPD. He lives on Long Island with his girlfriend, we're told, and said his actions were all in a day's work and basically don't bother me anymore. I don't want to be in the public eye. I want to serve the city. Good for the officer. Turning now to the Russian investigation, President Trump tonight telling the New York Times that the Mueller indictments, quote, have nothing to do with us. This as congressional investigators seek answers from the Department of Justice and the FBI about Fusion GPS and the so-called Trump dossier that has been debunked. Fox News Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen has all the details for us now.
When investigators for House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes arrived at the Justice Department Tuesday to review DOJ and FBI documents relating to the infamous Trump dossier, they were met by 2 Democratic committee staffers, 2 staffers for Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and the Intelligence Committee's ranking Democrat, Adam Schiff, who had earlier argued against the subpoena that pried loose the documents.
It's only going to impede our ability to get at the facts.
The Trump dossier, of course, was the salacious compendium of unverified allegations against then-candidate Trump that was funded by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee and compiled with input from Russian sources by the research firm Fusion GPS. Nunes and other GOP lawmakers want to know whether Justice and the FBI used the dossier last year as the basis for surveillance warrants on Trump campaign personnel.
How would you describe the attitude of Democrats on the Intelligence Committee towards the probing of the origins of this so-called dossier and how they're accepting that?
Well, look, to me it looks like they're obstructing the investigation.
Committee sources said that DOJ was less than fully responsive to the subpoenas, particularly on foreign surveillance warrants, and that Nunes will seek additional production.
I'm not aware that any change would be necessary at this time.
The White House, meantime, expressed support for Agriculture Department nominee Sam Clovis, the Trump campaign official who encouraged George Papadopoulos to travel to Russia, if feasible, to strengthen contacts in and around the Kremlin. A low-level foreign policy advisor to the campaign, Papadopoulos has since pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russians last year. In the government's original motion to seal documents in the Papadopoulos case, filed shortly after his arrest in July and unsealed this week, the Mueller team argued for secrecy because premature disclosure of Papadopoulos' arrest would, quote, significantly undermine his ability to serve as a proactive cooperator.
That signals that he has probably been wearing a wire or tape recording his conversations with anybody that was involved in the campaign for President Trump.
As well, the special counsel's summary of the Papadopoulos case, Robert Mueller's first accounting of what happened in 2016, has received its first challenge from Joseph Mifsud, the professor who was said to have provided Papadopoulos entree to Russians with dirt on Hillary Clinton. While Professor Mifsud's resume appears thinly defined and his published works have supported the Putin regime, Mifsud told the Telegraph newspaper in London it was, quote, incredible for anyone to suggest he had ever been privy to dirt on Mrs. Clinton. Lou?
James, fascinating. Thank you very much. James Rosen reporting. We're coming right back. Much more still ahead. Stay with us. President Trump calls for justice following the cowardly terrorist attack in New York City.
Send him to Gitmo. I would certainly consider that.
We take up as well the president's call for more extreme vetting. General Jack Keane, our guest, here next. And this ambitious wingsuiter performing stunts that have never been done before. We'll show you the spectacular video from Switzerland. Here next. Stay with us. Two Russian Tu-95 bombers had to be escorted away from the U.S. aircraft carrier in the Sea of Japan Sunday. The two Russian aircraft within 80 miles of the USS Ronald Reagan. Two F-18 Hornets were dispatched to escort them out of the area. The Pentagon says the situation was resolved without incident. The U.S. Navy currently has 3 carrier strike forces in the Western Pacific. Joining me now, retired 4-star General, Fox News military analyst Jack Keane. General, let me start with the aircraft carrier incident. That seems awfully close, 80 miles for those bombers to approach. Your reaction to that kind of confrontation?
They resent the fact that we are reinforcing our allies, that we're standing up against North Korea, that they own an aircraft carrier. That's it. And
Russia has 1 aircraft carrier.
And we have 12. And we put 3 of them in one place at one time. We haven't done anything like that in over 10 years. So they fly these bombers from the 1950s close to our aircraft carriers, and we punch a couple of fighters up. We're not intimidated by it. It doesn't mean anything to us. We don't have to overreact to it. They know what the capability we have, and we know what their limited capability is also.
Well, the firepower represented by those 3 strike forces, carrier strike forces in the Western Pacific, I think that's where we get to the level of unthinkable, what they can do in the way of damage. It is also, to me, interesting that they are concerned about this. It's like instead of a cry for help from Russia and, frankly, China, they're engaged in sort of a cry for the return of Barack Obama. They want a patsy, and they know they don't have one in the White House now.
No, they know that for a fact because, I mean, President Trump, despite all the criticism during the campaign, has called out Russia for all of their adverse behavior. He's gone to NATO and told them, we're going to stand with you against Russian aggression. We're not going to tolerate it. So the Russians know they got a different president.
And let me turn to the terrorist attack in New York City, the first terrorist attack since September 11th in New York. Your reaction to it, and I just want to say again to young Officer Nash, who shot the terrorist down, great work, congratulations, and we're very fortunate to have New York's finest here in the city.
Yeah, well, I'm a born and raised New Yorker, so obviously anything like that becomes somewhat personal, even though you feel somewhat similar when it happens any place in America. But listen, when I think about this, I try to put it in a strategic context. It's been 25 years since we've been attacked here at the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993.
Right.
And what has happened as a result of all of our efforts and our allies' efforts against radical Islam? Radical Islam has morphed into a global jihad. It is thriving and it is growing. Despite taking the caliphate away from ISIS just recently in Iraq and Syria, that movement, which inspired this youngster, has moved into 30 countries. It's attacked NATO 40 times in 2.5 years, to include the United States, which is a NATO country. They are dead serious, the radical Islamists. They are at war with civilization. And we, despite all the verbiage and despite the great work our military is doing and police enforcement is doing, when you look at the policies, we are not at war with them. We're not even serious. Let me give you a couple examples. Open southern border, immigration without sufficient vetting, sanctuary cities. We've got no global strategy to deal with the problem. In this city, and like of other cities, we will not conduct surveillance of radicalized mosques and education centers, or even try to penetrate them, because that's offensive to people, and we have no strategies to deal with it.
Look what's happened to a president who said, we're going to secure the southern border, a border across which comes most of the vast majority of the marijuana, the cocaine, the heroin, methamphetamines that enter this country every year and decimate our youth. And it doesn't matter what social or economic strata you're in. And we have a Congress that mocks him. We have a national liberal media that mocks him, rather than saying it's time to go to war against this evil. There's a mad paralysis that is gripping the will of this country, the people's will.
And we have some really hypocritical, phony politicians, to be frank about it, and I'm fed up with them. I mean, the feckless Europeans who wring their hands after every attack that happens in Europe, but they never change any of their policies about open borders, massive immigration, multicultural neighborhoods. Here, we've got de Blasio and Cuomo standing up right there in front of us and telling us this is a lone wolf attack. It's not. He's part of a worldwide movement. They say the guy's a coward. The guy's not a coward. He's willing to die for what he believes in. He's willing to give up his life for something larger than himself. Is he morally reprehensible? Yes. Should he burn in hell? Yes. Should we kill him if we can? Yes, of course, all of those things. We got politicians here that tell us that we should go about our routine in our lives, but they're not telling us that we're at war and we should know and give us some aids to how to protect our lives. The American people are adults. They'll figure out how to go about the routine, even though letting them know that we're at war and it's a dangerous situation that they're facing. They're adults.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Thank you, General.
Good talking to you.
Maybe your words will fall on listening ears at City Hall, at least. Thanks so much, General. Up next, new details about the man behind the anti-Trump dossier and how much Fusion GPS paid him. I'm curious about how much GPS Fusion paid a lot of people. They seem to have made a lot of progress in keeping their secrets. Why is that? We'll find out. Judicial Watch President Tom Fenton takes up the Clinton corruption and the Russia witch hunt. Here next. Well, so we've learned something new about Fusion GPS, and there's scant new that we are learning about this group. They seem to have a lot of people who want to protect their secrets. Well, it turns out that they paid an ex-British spy $168,000 for his work on the infamous, discredited, and debunked Trump dossier. The group, Fusion GPS, calls itself an opposition research group. They're all of that, plus a smear machine and a lot of other things. The law firm saying the money had been paid to former MI6 officer Christopher Steele, and it came from more than $1 million that GPS got from the Perkins Coie law firm representing the Obama campaign, Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic National Committee. So we know how little of the money was spent. We don't know how much money Fusion GPS was making. It was dirty work, so we suspect quite a bit. Joining us now, Tom Fenton, president of Judicial Watch. I can't say enough what a great job Judicial Watch has done in encouraging government and ne'er-do-wells to enlarge the body of public knowledge. We appreciate it, Tom.
Thank you, Lou.
This is a peculiar, to say the least, deal. We find out how much Christopher Steele made to smear Donald Trump. And we don't have the records. We don't see anything. A judge declares we can't see it. I'm about as fed up with the way things are operating there as I can be. How about you?
I am too. We've got a real crisis here in the sense that it's one thing to have Democratic lawyers or Fusion GPS lawyers protecting the dossier information, payments about it. It's another thing to have the FBI and Justice Department fighting to keep the public in the dark on this. I mean, we just checked the other day with the FBI. They've been telling us they can't confirm or deny whether the dossier even exists or not, or documents about the payments related to the dossier exist.
You mean the one that reportedly, there are reports that, in point of fact, the FBI paid for part of it, that offered to reimburse expenses for it, and in fact may have used it for FISA warrants before federal judges. I mean, that's quite a statement to come from.
Well, that's true, and they just reportedly this week allowed members of the House, or at least their staff, to look at some of the documents. So why are they letting Congress look at the documents but not letting the American people get a look-see at some of these documents and telling Judicial Watch they can't confirm or deny they exist?
I think there might be
FBI is...
If I may, Tom, there may be, I can't resist this, there may be a greater faith on the part of Fusion GPS that Congress will keep their secrets than they are with you at Judicial Watch. They're probably pretty afraid that you will share with the public. I mean, we've got a ridiculous situation in which we've got closed-door hearings and people telling us about national security, congressmen and senators. And it's a joke, because it's clear that the thing that's broken here is the integrity of our committees in Congress, the integrity of our intelligence agencies, and I'm saying it out loud, because there is every evidence of corruption across all of those agencies.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough, and it may even be legal, but however unpleasant for the Clinton gang to collude with the Russians to take down Donald Trump. But if the FBI, under the tutelage of Barack Obama's administration, his appointees, were also doing this, that is the scandal of this decade. That's the scandal of the last 50 years. If you have the FBI, CIA, Justice Department using this dossier, which is a political hit job put out by their Democratic allies to go after the incoming president or wannabe president in the case of when it was in the campaign, boy, what a scandal that would be. That is why I think they don't want us to get access to the information, because they don't want to institutionally put themselves on the block here.
Well, they're on the block. The question is whether or not anyone in Congress, anyone in the Senate has the guts to actually pursue oversight over those agencies. To this point, I've seen no sign that any one of those agencies has the guts to oversee the activities and to truly find out what the FBI top officials have been doing and why. Tom,
let me just quickly, Lou, let's ask Mr. Mueller to investigate whether the FBI and Justice Department colluded with the Russians to go after Trump and involve themselves in the election.
Tom Fitton, as always, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Lou.
Up next, House Republicans hours away from releasing their tax cut plan. We'll take it up with Ed Rollins and Michael Goodwin here next. Joining me now, Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin. I'll tell you all about him, much more about him here later.
The next hour.
The next hour, absolutely. I want to turn first to this attack. Despicable. The president is just his exercise. And I got to thinking, it's nice to see somebody
angry,
just get mad as hell. It's the president of the United States reacting to the deaths.
Well, he's reacting the way people out in the streets react. I mean, they're appalled by this behavior and the fact that you go on the internet and follow this stuff and go run a truck for $19 and go down and kill 8 people is just outrageous. And I think to a certain extent, the gun lobby will, the gun control people will be front and center, but it has nothing to do with it. But
gun control, truck control.
Truck control. They got to find something to control, because what is it? You know, I have to say, I was also, Michael, just appalled to watch these local officials, state officials, get there 15 minutes before cameras and take all of this time and say nothing to the American people, the people of this city.
Well, and what was missing was any passion, any anger from the part of the governor, the mayor.
They're bureaucrats.
Yeah, well, they're afraid of offending, so they're gonna dance around the truth here and not say it as though they're all in mourning. Lead with strength, not with fear.
And you know, and I love these calls for, you know, people just act like nothing happened. Right. No, do not act like nothing happened.
Something did happen.
Be angry and insist that these people actually do something. And the suggestion in that is act normal, is that the rest of us are a bunch of damn cowards and fools. Right. And in fact, the people of this city, the people of this country are absolutely up to every challenge and every possible response against this kind of evil.
Well, it has to stop, and it's only going to stop by us making it stop. The government's not going to stop it. And I think to a certain extent, we have to be outraged. We have to educate people about these kinds of people, and anybody that's suspicious, basically, you have to report. And there's a lot of people going to not be happy with that, but we have to do that.
It becomes, who have we become as Americans? Right. You look around you, and you've got these people, these officials, and they're enough to make you sick at your stomach.
Right. Well, they lack the courage to have a conviction over what is clearly a life and death matter for individual members of their city and state, but also for the will of the country. I mean, the public interest is being disregarded in favor of political correctness. I mean, they're totally lost.
And we mustn't, extreme vetting mustn't do that. We mustn't control where these people come from, who these people are who want to enter our country. Far be it from me to suggest that American citizens should have a say in who becomes an American citizen.
Well, the added tragedy yesterday was the group of people who are visiting here who got killed, and this should be the safest city in the country with the number of police we have and what have you. Just the whole thing.
Very quickly, John Kelly cannot escape an asinine, braying bunch of hyenas within the White House press corps who challenge him and continue to talk about his statement about the Civil War and compromise. What is wrong with those people?
I think for one thing, they clearly don't understand history. I mean, the end of the Civil War was about reconciliation. That was Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural, was to bind up the nation's wounds. And John Kelly is a warrior.
You're entitled to criticize John Kelly if you've been in the wars that he's been in and you win the stars and the medals and
well, the great thing is, if you're an American, you're entitled to criticize. You're a damn fool if you do it, in my opinion. Thanks very much.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
There you go. Michael, thank you very much. Ed, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks for being with us. Good night from New York.